We keep doing these continuums on purpose because you go from healthy leader to clear vision to strong teams to multiplying ministry. So I want us to think about what is the progression, because that progression as a pastor, as a spiritual leader, is something that you are going to do thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times over and over. If you stay in the game, you're going to do this thousands of times, and you're going to start learning as you do it. You're going to learn when you invest in somebody, you're going to learn to decipher what are the investments that really seem to be ripe. You're going to learn where you waste your time with certain people, what makes it a waste of time. And not that a person is a waste, but that they're not ready for the opportunity. You're going to learn to wait until they're ready. As Rick Warren used to say, if the fruit is ripe, you don't have to yank it. And, so like, that's what Jesus was like. Don't waste your time in the home of somebody who's not receptive, but you're going to keep doing this thing over and over again. And eventually you're going to find people who are actually going to be doing this alongside you. So you're like, oh, wow, I found somebody that multiplies. And so then you make one investment and it has a, 100-fold payoff because you found someone that's faithful, and now you're both doing that. And then they're going and they're finding somebody who's faithful, and you're finding another person who's faithful. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this is really, and when that starts happening, it gets very exciting. So it goes from doing ministry to delegating tasks, to transferring ownership, to developing leaders, to multiplying ministry. So, you start out doing, then you delegate, then you transfer, then you develop, then you multiply. And so there's that kind of 5-part, and sometimes it shifts around a little bit, but the idea is that continuum of I'm doing something to I'm multiplying, and there's obviously those phases, and Jesus even did it, and he trained people for a while, and then he sends them out 2 by 2, right? And then, as we know, they came back, debriefed, right? Like, well, hey, we tried to cast out demons and didn't work, this thing isn't real, and just like those are all the parts of what we have to do. But if you look at that continuum yourself, answer the question, and I'm not going to stop asking this in different ways. Where do you currently spend most of your time? The areas of your ministry that are the most impacting are always going to be the ones where you've worked that continuum to get to multiplying ministry. But as we've talked, it's slow. I mean, there's nothing fast about this. There's years of investment in people. That's the hard part of multiplying ministry, is that you don't always get to finish the task, and sometimes people bow out for different reasons. Sometimes God sends people. Do you remember in Acts, there's this place where it says that the disciples wept bitterly when Paul was going to leave, and he wept bitterly because that departure is painful sometimes. You're like, oh, when are we going to hang out again? And it can hurt. So sometimes that can make people jaded and keep them from investing in people. And I think you got to watch your heart on that. I think a helpful thing is to remember, we don't minister to a lake, we minister to a river. You know what? We get to be with people for as long as the Lord has us with people. And so when you glob onto somebody and think, we're always going to be this close, it's always going to be like this, we're always going to have these cool coffee meetings, we're always going to, not true. It's going to change the moment the Lord decides it's going to change, and so it's a river. You might get a month with somebody, you might get a year, you might get a decade, but you don't get forever. And the Lord is the Lord of the harvest, and he moves things around as he wants. And I think sometimes we can easily get discouraged if we have our expectations in permanence with people. It can actually keep us from multiplying. And I've watched that just in my own life, and I have to watch my own heart for that, because people come and people go, and that doesn't mean they hate us. Sometimes they do, but you can't take that stuff personally. It's the Lord's deal. So again, where do you spend most of your time? Is it doing? Have you gotten to delegating? Have you gotten transferring ownership, which is like beyond delegating? Delegating is like, hey, go do this thing, come back and tell me. Ownership is like, here's the steering wheel. You got this. Developing leaders is, lots and lots of people taking that kind of thing. And then multiplying ministry is like, almost like you could hand a whole ministry to somebody and be like, there you go. And now I'm going to shift my attention and do this again. And then, by the way, you do that too. And that's true discipleship, is like Paul says to Timothy, teach other people who will be capable of teaching other people. So it's that always thinking about, almost always thinking about, how does this succeed without me? It's one of the best questions. How does this succeed without me? Without my presence. And it can succeed without your presence if you set that up. So there's 4 bottlenecks that I want you to see. The first one is the person bottleneck. And that's when, and by bottleneck, we're saying bottlenecks are not good, right? Bottlenecks are where the flow gets limited and it stops progress. So we're looking to eliminate bottlenecks. The key to multiplication is eliminating bottlenecks, because that's how you democratize ministry, is that you give it away to everybody when you remove the bottlenecks. So one kind of bottleneck is a person bottleneck, where like a person is the gatekeeper for knowledge or responsibility, or permission. And so if there's a person that you have to go to, and maybe if you're the person, you could start thinking about, how would I undo this? How do I not be the bottleneck? I'm constantly trying to do that. How do I not be the bottleneck? How do I not be the one, well, Gabe said this, or Gabe said no, or, I don't know, ask Gabe. I don't like when that happens, because it tells me that I haven't set things up to multiply. So whenever that happens, I have to go to work on, let's blow that up. We cannot have it like that. There's going to be a limited set where I want that, right? Like, don't go outside this theology. Don't go outside this budget, right? There's things you have to have. In like now with the building, don't go outside this timeline. You got to work inside this timeline. So there's all that stuff. But once you've set the canvas, then it should be like, go paint. So there's the person bottleneck. There's the process bottleneck. The work is unclear, inconsistent, or too complicated. So in your own ministry, like, what might be stopping people from taking ownership and leading? Because that's what it's going to take. You multiply leaders. What process might be bottlenecking? Then there's permission. Again, responsibility has been given without a decision authority. And I think one of the ones that we neglect is this last one, is pipeline. There's no clear process for developing and releasing leaders. One of the things that we try to do at Westside is called a ministry ladder. And it starts, like where the lowest level, meaning it's the first step for somebody. And there's really no prerequisites. Anybody can serve. And then you start going, well, as the responsibility goes up, so do the requirements. So it kind of stair steps up. What's helpful about that is what they call line of sight, or people can see their progress. They can see where their next step is, and every ministry needs that. But a lot of times we don't think past the ministry itself. So we don't think, what if somebody feels called beyond this ministry? How do I actually pave the way for that for them? So I'm thinking about that for our church right now, because I think this could be important for where we go as a church in multiplication. Is, well, how do people think about getting involved in a church plant, and how do we help that be visible for people? How do people aspire to be on our board? How do people aspire to become a staff person at our church? How do people aspire to become a pastor at our church or beyond our church? So those are, I think, questions that we're asking, but that's a pipeline thing. Because if all they see is a ceiling at some point, then what we've noticed is as soon as they start to think they're going to hit that ceiling, they go somewhere else where the ceiling lifts. And sometimes that's not inside the kingdom. So sometimes we lose kingdom energy because we don't think about pipeline.